Hello everyone, I am teacher Daphne and I'm one of the lecturers in this program. But before we begin our lecture, here are some facts related to our lesson. Did you know that celebrities has learning disorders or learning disabilities or learning difficulties too? Let's have a quick look. Who is he? Right, he's Tom Cruise, a very famous actor. But did you know that he was dyslexic? Tom Cruise spent his childhood trying to hide his dyslexia from his peers. Diagnosed at the age of 7, Cruise described his younger self as a functional illiterate. But in this time, he could barely read something, especially when he was in high school or through his earliest roles. Another celebrity that we could see is Harry Potter. Okay, that is not his real name. He is Daniel Radcliffe. Right, he is very famous for his movie Harry Potter. But did you know that he has mild form of dyspraxia? As a child, he has trouble with handwriting and tying his shoelaces. His early school years were very difficult because he was awful at everything with no discernible talent. Another actor or another celebrity that we know is Justin Timberlake. Justin Timberlake, the multifaceted singer and actor, revealed in an interview that he has both obsessive-compulsive disorder and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. However, he didn't elaborate more about it. Since that interview, Timberlake hasn't spoken about his conditions. Another celebrity that we could see is, yes, her name is Daryl Hannah. She has said that she was very shy growing up. As a young child, Hannah was emotionally isolated and struggled in school. She was subsequently diagnosed with autism, and medical professionals urged her parents, to have her institutionalized. Surprising, right? Yes. Now, if you notice, I mentioned the words dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and autism. So, in this lecture, we are going to talk about learners with special needs. Specifically, it is divided into two parts. First part is about the specific learning difficulties, whereas part 2 is about how we can cope up with these learners and what suitable activities we can provide for them. Now let's begin with part 1. In this lecture, you will be able to learn about specific learning disabilities or difficulties, and we are also going to talk about the signs and symptoms. Let's start. So, specific learning difficulties are neurological in origin and badly impact the learning and processing of information. It is an umbrella term used to refer one or more of the following difficulties, which are dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD, and autism. Although autism is not a specific learning disability, but a high percentage of autistic students often also have a specific learning difficulty diagnosis. So let's get started with dyslexia. What is dyslexia? Dyslexia is a common learning difficulty with reading, writing, and spelling. Dyslexic learners' reading comprehension is sometimes impaired due to very poor word reading skill. Here are some signs and symptoms of dyslexia. A dyslexic person may read and write very slowly. They tend to confuse the order of the letters in words. So just like in the picture, as you can see, it is jumbled, or it is written the other way around. Sometimes they put the letters in a wrong way round, such as writing B instead of writing D. They also have poor or inconsistent spelling, just like in this picture. Okay. Another symptom is that they can understand information when told verbally, but have difficulty with information when written down. So it's easier for them to listen to information rather than reading an information. They also find it hard to carry out a sequence of direction. And lastly, they struggle with planning and organizing. So it's really messed up. These are the signs and symptoms of dyslexia. Let's move on. Dyspraxia is the second specific learning difficulty that we could notice in children. So what is dyspraxia? Dyspraxia is known as developmental coordination disorder. It is a brain-based condition that makes it difficult for the affected child to coordinate with physical movement, control speech, and learn in a traditional classroom environment. So, scientists do not cause dyspraxia. Experts, however, believe that person's nerve cells that controls the muscles, like motor neurons, are not developing correctly. If motor neurons cannot form proper connections for whatever reason, the brain will take much longer time to process information. So, let's take a look at how we can tell if a person has dyspraxia. A person with dyspraxia may have difficulty coordinating both sides of the body. They have unclear speech. Often word order can be jumbled, disarranged, or disordered. They tend to have clumsy movement and tendency to trip over. They also have poor hand and eye coordination. Not only that, but they also have difficulty planning and organizing their thoughts and the task that they are doing. When it comes to social and sensory, they are very sensitive to taste, light, the touch, and even noise. Therefore, if they experience too much of these things, they become uncomfortable and unable to focus. So, these are the different signs and symptoms of dyspraxia. So if you notice this in your children, try to encourage them to seek the doctor's attention. Let's move on. We have here the word, or letters, I should say, ADHD. What does it mean, or what does ADHD stand for? What do you think? Aha, you're right. ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. So what is this? Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, or known as ADHD, is a mental health disorder that can cause above normal level of hyperactivity and impulsive behavior. People with ADHD may also have trouble focusing their attention on single task or sitting still for a long period of time. So they tend to move around, distract the class, or they even go and play with their peers. According to some researchers, boys are more than twice as likely as girls to receive an ADHD diagnosis. This may be because boys tend to exhibit hallmark symptoms of hyperactivity. Although some girls with ADHD may have the classic symptoms of hyperactivity and they may don't. In many cases, girls with ADHD daydream frequently and may be hyper talkative rather than hyperactive. So they prefer to talk a lot, talk to friends, talk to family, or talk to anybody instead of being hyperactive, like moving around. Okay? I remember when I was teaching in an inclusive classroom, I also observed these kinds of things between boys and girls. So the boys are more of the, how can I say, movement. They like to move around, play, and distract the friends. But for girls, they often talk too much. So classes sometimes are a mess. Let's take a look at what are the signs and symptoms of ADHD. What do you think? What do you think are the signs and symptoms of ADHD? First is hyperactivity. As I mentioned to you earlier, ADHD learners has tendency to become very hyperactive. This means that they are very active in class to a point that they distract others' attention. They tend to move from one place to another or play instead of study or instead of studying. They squirm or fidget and they talk too much. That is hyperactivity. Another sign is inattention. What does inattention mean? This simply means that ADHD learners have very short attention span. They tend to daydream. Yes, they tend to daydream most of the time and wander their thoughts around. So even if they were given a task, they don't start right away. Instead, they just think of other things. Another thing is impulsive, being impulsive. Someone who is impulsive may interrupt others a lot. They tend to grab things from people or speak at inappropriate time. So it is hard for this person to wait for their turn or even to listen to directions. Sometimes when the teacher is providing the instruction, they start right away without even letting the teacher finish talking. All right? And a person with impulsiveness may have more accidents and injuries than others. So, I will give you an example. During my practicum back then, as I told you, I taught in an inclusive school and was able to handle ADHD students. My class went well at the beginning of our lesson, but as time goes by, I ended up calling their attention because they kept going around playing with somebody and they totally disrupt my class. I also need to get their attention because some of them just continuously talking and then saying, Teacher Daphne, Teacher Daphne, Teacher Daphne, over and over. Like, I don't know why, but they just want to seek attention. And some of them, they were just daydreaming. So even if I talked to them, they were like, okay, I want to do this and I want to do that. So they don't listen. All right. Now, these are just examples. I wonder, have you encountered ADHD students or an ADHD child? How was your experience with them? I wonder. So, these are the signs and symptoms of ADHD. Another thing that we could see is autism spectrum disorder, or more likely we call it the autism. So what is autism? Autism is a condition characterized by challenges with skills, repetitive behaviors, speech, and nonverbal communications, as well as by unique strengths and differences. So, have you seen an autistic child? Have you encountered one? How can we know if this child is autistic? So here are the signs and symptoms. One is a child with autism has hard time interacting with others. Problems with social skills are some of the most common signs of autism. They might want to have close relationship, but they don't know how to. Therefore, they prefer to just keep quiet and just do their task. So sometimes we misunderstand their action. We thought that they just wanted to be alone. The thing there is, they don't know how to deal with other people. I don't know how it feels to be an autistic child, but I also noticed that their social skill is really a big problem. Okay? Second is communication. Of course, autistic children cannot socialize with others because they don't know how to communicate with them. Children with autism have trouble communicating. They have also trouble in understanding what other people think and how other people feel. And this makes it very hard for them to express themselves either with words or through gestures, facial expressions, and touch. So, if you notice that they have this kind of signs and symptoms, you better go with them and then encourage them to be with others or to assist them how to do it or how to deal with it. Last, patterns of behavior. Children with ASD acts in ways that seem unusual or have interests that aren't typical, which includes repetitive behavior, such as hand flapping, racking, or even jumping, twirling, constant moving, and hyper behavior. Hyper behavior means they sometimes, move or bite their nails, tap their legs, or they just hurt themselves. That is hyper behavior. They are extremely sensitive to touch, just like dyspraxia. Not only touch, they are also sensitive to light and sound. So, if things aren't going well according to their preference, they throw off tantrums right away. I didn't only handle ADHD students, but fortunately, I was also able to handle autistic children. Although not a lot, maybe just around 3, but different classroom. So I noticed that these learners with autism, when they really cannot handle something, they just they don't cry, but they hurt themselves by slapping their face, biting their hand to a point that it bleeds, or they just throw everything. One of the most dangerous things that I have seen is that they even become aggressive. They try to punch. They punch their classmates, not only their classmates, even the teacher herself. And that was me. At first, I didn't know that they were that aggressive, and I don't know, but I think the child just doesn't want me in the classroom. And so he just came to me and then start slapping me and punching me, and I didn't even know what to do. So I just asked for an assistance from the teacher. Very scary for me that time. It was very scary. However, I was able to learn how to handle this child. I was able to handle this child, and at least at some point, I was able to manage how I could make him feel comfortable in the class. Okay, so these are the signs and symptoms of autism. Let's recall. There are different learning difficulties in every child, okay? And in the classroom, we might observe these kinds of learners who are having difficulties. So, we have dyspraxia, we have dyslexia, we also have ADHD, and we also have autism. Let us not neglect these kinds of difficulties among the children. Instead, we should learn how to help them. We should ask for help if we do not know. We should seek an advice, especially to the teachers who are specialized in this kind of education. So, the question is, how can we help or cope up with these learners with special needs? What do you think? So this will be your homework. I would like you to think of ways on how we can help or how we can cope up with dyslexic child, with a child with dyspraxia, and an ADHD learner, or even autistic child. How can we help them? In the next video, we are going to answer this question. So I hope to see you there. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.